Goedemorgen. I practice that a bit, but I still kind of get it wrong sometimes. Does everybody have a bit of, has this, the name tag? If you look closely, you will find that it's a really interesting design with name, your Twitter account, your company, and then the country where you're based. And when I was checking the attendee list, I found that there's people coming from over the world, over Europe, to join CSS Day, which makes this a really diverse and interesting crowd. And did you also know that in Amsterdam itself, there are people from 183 different countries living in Amsterdam? So I was blown away by the fact. And then when thinking about diverse crowds like this or designing for users around the world, this makes me think about, do culture differences actually affect how users perceive and use the product and services that we design? And then when we work with someone from a different culture, what is the thing to be aware of for better collaboration? So that's something that I want to explore in this talk today. But before I go on, I'd like to understand, where are you from? Raise your hand if you're from Holland, if you're from the Netherlands. Cool, about like 90% of people. Who are not from the Netherlands? Okay, wow, that's 70% of the people. So that means that people have different mixed background. They're expat or they have mixed parents from different nationalities. So that's really cool. All right, my name is Shen. I'm an independent designer and localization consultant. I'm also a member of the talent network called TopTal. And as Ruben mentioned, I'm the founder of Ladies at UX Amsterdam. And recently, I've been promoted to the regional director of EMEA to work on global strategy. And I have a fascination with living and working abroad. I was born in Taiwan, and when I was 12, my family moved to Canada. And since 2012, I've moved to many different countries and to explore what it's like to live in India, Singapore, US, and now I'm based in the Netherlands. And because of these cultural immersions, I am very blessed to have the opportunity to work for clients around the world, for users around the world. And to explore the topic today, we first must understand, what is culture, and what does that mean? Dutch social psychologist Geert Hofstede, he created a study of cultural dimensions where it looks at a culture in 6 different dimensions: power distance, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And this is how the Netherlands compared to Taiwan in terms of cultural differences. We'll go into a bit more details a bit later. And Erin Meyer, who is the author of the book Culture Map, she also tried to research about the cultural differences in how people interact with each other. Can we switch on the audio, please? Let's try again.
You might be a star negotiator in your own country, but in today's global economy, your skills may not automatically translate to other cultures. For instance, in some cultures, it's entirely appropriate to show emotion during a negotiation, to raise your voice, laugh passionately, or even put a friendly arm around your counterpart. In others, this much expression not only feels intrusive or surprising, but may be viewed as immature or unprofessional. Then there's open disagreement. Negotiators often assume that more expressive cultures are also more confrontational, but that isn't always the case. In some countries, such as France and Israel, emotions pour out, including disagreement. But for other very expressive cultures, such as Brazil, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia, open disagreement could be seen as insulting. Some less expressive cultures, such as Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, see open disagreement and debate as positive and necessary, as long as it's expressed calmly and factually. Others tend to be both less emotional and non-confrontational, which means you'll have to be especially attuned to subtle cues for both positive and negative responses. It's also important to learn how others build trust. There are two distinct types, cognitive and affective, and in a business setting, the dominant type of trust varies from one culture to another. Cognitive trust is task-based. It comes from the head and is built on your counterpart's accomplishments, skills, and reliability. American culture offers a good example of this kind of trust. In the United States, getting too emotionally close to a business counterpart is seen as unprofessional, and mixing the personal and professional is seen as risky. Affective trust is relationship-based and comes from the heart. It arises from the feelings of emotional closeness, empathy, and friendship that are developed gradually through sharing meals, evening drinks, and coffee breaks. In China, for instance, negotiators are unlikely to trust their counterparts until an effective connection has been made. Adapting your negotiation approach accordingly will help you get to yes, or si, ja, oui, hai, and da.
So we learned from that video that Dutch culture is confrontational and emotionally unexpressive. What does that mean, and why should we even care for people who design and develop for web and mobile services? According to Jacob Nielsen and Elisa Delgado, the author of International User Interfaces, they said it is not enough to just translate your product. Users are expecting something that acknowledges their cultural characteristics and unique local business practices. So here I'd like to share with you my process and some of the ways that you could design for users of different cultures. The first way, of course, is starting with research. And I've lived in Holland for about 3 years now, and I learned a lot about the Dutch culture. But in the beginning, I didn't always know what are some of the differences between Holland, Canada, and Taiwan. So this is what I learned. The Dutch culture dimensions, according to Hofstede, is that they score high in individualism, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. And Hofstede has a summary for cultures of every country. And this is his summary. Part of the summary is that Dutch users are pragmatic, they are thrifty, and they have a tendency to save for the future. So before I learned a lot about the Dutch culture, I was tasked to design something for Travelbird, which probably some of you might know here. It's an online travel agency, and we help users find good travel deals. And this user story was, this is the passport data form, which we need a user to fill out in order to purchase them the flight or the travel package. And the problem here was that users were filling in their nicknames, their initials, they fill in whatever they want, their pseudonyms. And we couldn't book them the flight, of course, using those information. So I made this indicative message to tell the users to use their passport names with a bold treatment, with a passport icon. And here the instruction says, make sure your name matches the one in your passport. An incorrect name could lead to refusal at the gate. So I thought it's a pretty serious consequence, and surely users must start filling in their names according to the passport. So we rolled out this design, and we tested it for some time. And I was surprised to find out that this does not work at all. Users were still filling in whatever they used to fill in this passport form. So that got my curiosity to look for references, and I look at how our competitors and other companies do this. And this is the booking form, the passport data form from Transavia. So as you can see here, I have a really big block to ask for passenger details according to the passport. And what's really interesting is that it highlights this. You can pay €4 now, and you'll be able to change your names. Or you can pay €50 if later you need to change your name and you realize it's not correct. So I thought this probably would have worked better on Dutch users who are pragmatic. I also learned a lot about the neighbor Germany. According to Hofstede, this is Germany's cultural dimensions. They score high in individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. And the summary given by host data is that German users need a systematic overview, and they are looking for details, they are looking for certainty. They require something to be very well thought out. An example from one of my past projects at Travel Bergen, this is the booking form where users select the day and continue on to checkout. So this is the page for the Netherlands. And this is the page for Germany. Did you notice a difference between the Netherlands version and the Germany version? The difference is this list of inclusive and exclusive as well as the trust badges. So normally, those who work in e-commerce, it is more usual to assume that telling users what is not included could lead the user to second-guess themselves and compare different packages and think that, oh, this one doesn't include airport transfer, let me look for a better package. So they will be looking for a better deal. So therefore, it's probably not a good idea to tell users what is not included. However, we tested the design of this list of inclusives and exclusive, and we found out that having this detail actually increased the conversion rate. So we decided to keep it. The second thing you can do is to research the local UI patterns. I want to share 2 examples of East versus West differences. Did you know that in China, Discover is the new hamburger menu? Because obviously, hamburger, China. Dan Gover is an ex-project manager at Tencent WeChat, and he looked at tons of Chinese apps, and he found this pattern where instead of a hamburger menu or the 3 dots more menu, it's replaced by this compass icon named Discover. So this compass icon with Discover, it tells the user, hey, here are more options. Here are some of the secondary actions that you can take, instead of something that's not very local. And the second example is Mozilla Firefox. This is the USA homepage where it's very minimal, it's very clean, and it's very clear what you can do. There's just a heading, and there's a CTA, and it shows what a browser looks like. So this is the American version, and this is the Chinese version. So why is the design look drastically different? Why is there now so much information and so many banners and ads? And in case you're wondering, this button is not to download, it's actually to post in the forum. So Bram Pitoyo is the design strategist at Mozilla, and he went to research why there's a big difference between the East and the West. He looked at the most popular sites using both USA and China. And the ranking is that the top one is Baidu and Google, of course. These are search engines optimized for searching. But when you look at the other sites, you look at Sohu, Sina, QQ, Yahoo, these have a really different design. These have a newspaper-style portal design with a ton of information and tons of text, and to a Western user, it's almost overwhelming. And his assumption for the difference is because of typing input. If typing Chinese takes a long time and finding the precise word is not easy, then instead of optimize for searching, we should optimize for browsing, where users can just view and just click on whatever they find it relevant or interesting. The third way that you could design for users of different culture is to measure the data. This client, this bookers, they reached out to ask me to help them increase the conversion rates for Germany. And they're based in Holland. This is the old Dutch and German homepage. So they offer flexible co-working and meeting spaces. And the problem that they asked me to solve was the conversion rate. And it was not that their product was not relevant or useful. They were making a lot of sales through the phone call for the Germany locale, but they were not making any sales on the website. So I looked into heat maps and recordings and to measure where users are clicking and viewing. And it was interesting where the insight that users first clicked on help and company-related links before they proceed into using this availability calendar. So that was really odd. Why was the user trying to find help if they were not even trying to use it in the first place? My assumption was that it was because of lack of trust and also the ambiguity in the product. If the users did not trust who desk bookers were, then they were trying to look for company information. Are they registered? Are they a legit company? Where are they based? In order to have more trust to proceed through the booking flow. And secondly, there was not enough information on websites, so they have to look for it themselves. So I offer my clients a few suggestions. So in order to make this website more credible, more trustworthy, I suggested them to add the trust logos, which you saw on Travelbird, as well as reviews from German customers with logos of German customers, accepting payment methods in Germany, as well as more description about the company in the footer to make it appear more trustworthy to a German user. So with these changes, this is the redesign with these design and content changes with all of the things here and makes it different from the Dutch version. And with these changes, we were happy to see that it was effective to help with the conversion rates. So now I've talked a lot about how to design for users of different culture, and I really like to offer something practical, which is how to actually research users of different cultures. The first place I go to is the host data culture dimensions calculator or tool. So if you go to host data insights.com and then you can input whatever country that you want to research for, and what's even better is that you can actually compare countries up to 3 because culture difference is relative. And here on the right in the website, it will show you all of a summary that a host data gathers from interviewing thousands of people. So this is the first place I go to. And the second thing I do is internet research. So you can find a lot of information on, for example, like Wikipedia, Internations, which is a website that's tailored for expats. And you can also find information on websites such as iAmsterdam or the equivalent for whatever country that you're researching for. And I want to talk about 3 things that you can probably find from the internet research. So colloquial language and slangs, characteristic, and as well as holidays and religions. That might be some of the things that you will find during this local culture research. So colloquial language and slangs, it affects your marketing designs and your microcopy. For example, this is Grab, which is like the Asian Uber, and this is the taxi function, the call a taxi function in Grab, and here is using Malay to say my taxi instead of a Western TAXI. It uses the Malay word to make it more friendly, make it more familiar for the local users. And as well, here's English. And in marketing, it makes the users much more excited or even just feel so friendly that you're talking about die must try, which means that you must try this before you die. And using these sort of interesting local language, I think it will be more effective in your marketing or increasing the delight in the user experience. The second thing I want to talk about is the characteristics. So I lived in Singapore for almost 2 years, and I heard about this, and I actually experienced this when I lived in Singapore. So it is known that Singaporean users typically have the culture of kiasu, which literally means the fear of losing. And the fear of losing means that users are drawn to competition, prestige, and scoring a good deal. This photo is showing a store reopening, a bubble tea shop store reopening. And they were giving out 100 bubble tea, like free bubble tea, like 100, and the bubble tea cost like €1.50. And you can see like hundreds of people try to line up for that €1 bubble tea because they want to be the one to score that good deal. They want to be the one to get that free bubble tea and talk about it on Facebook, how they have this prestige. And it's all because of the culture of Gyasu. So when you know this, you can actually apply it in your product and services, like using competitions or using discounts to actually draw and connect with a local user if that's what they like. The third thing that might come up in your local culture research is about holidays and religion. For example, in Singapore, this is the breakdown of different ethnical holidays and religions, and it's very diverse. So if you're running, say, an e-commerce site or you're running whatever campaign, it's not inclusive to just say Christmas. You must think about Vasak Day and Diwali and Hari Raya and those sort of other non-Western holidays to be really inclusive for the local users. As well, this is Uber. So in Lunar New Year, which is a holiday that a lot of Asian ethnicity people celebrate, even in the US and Canada, in Vietnam, Malaysia, a lot of people celebrate this. So they have this Lunar New Year, order a lion dance feature, where they actually have an illustration team and they design the year of rooster, and you can order a lion dance. And to users who celebrate Lunar New Year, it just feels super cool. And it's very interesting of users of this culture who celebrate it. And we feel that, hey, Uber knows about our culture. Uber acknowledged it. It makes the users feel more connected to the people who make the product. And lastly, in the local culture research, there's a hack that I want to tell you about. So one of the clients is in the fashion industry, and they wanted to interview as many as Singaporean luxury fashion users as possible. So even though I live in Singapore, I don't have a lot of friends who shop luxury fashion. So what do you do if you need to talk to a lot of users of that persona, but you don't have the contact? So I was thinking, if I cannot talk to the users, why don't I talk to somebody who have talked to the users? So I was just messaging my friends and asked them to introduce me to the UX managers working at e-commerce, fashion e-commerce, and I was messaging a lot of people, and luckily they agreed to do some informal interviews, and I was asking them about their research insights. And this is one thing that I was told by a UX manager at a large Singapore fashion e-commerce platform. She said, shopping is a hobby for many Singaporeans, and people buy just because something is on sale, mainly because there's not much to do in Singapore other than shopping. So I was a little bit surprised by the insight. And this is also echoing previously when I talked about the Gyasu culture, where people really like scoring a good deal. So you can actually, if you don't have time to talk to users, talk to somebody who have talked to the users. So aside from the local culture research, there's also something to be aware, which is the localization research. And localization is about how these culture differences manifest in the interface. So I will give you a step-by-step localization research. So you can do plenty of things to start with competitor analysis. You can research academic papers, e-commerce reports, and a lot of white papers. For any given country, there's probably some research being done already, so just look on the internet. However, there's one tip I want to give, which is to research in the local language instead of your own language, be it Dutch or English or whatever. Because one of my colleagues actually made this mistake before. When we were designing for users of Hong Kong and Taiwan, the head of Asia, who is an American, he went to research about e-commerce behavior, like device, mobile, desktop split in English. And he told us he couldn't find very much information. So I was almost going to believe it until I was just thinking, oh, why don't I just try it to type the search term in Chinese, which is actually a language I speak. And to my surprise, I found a lot of information. There are so many like mobile reports, e-commerce report, e-commerce research already being done, but it's just all in Chinese, which my colleague couldn't find. So I highly recommend you to partner up with a local or somebody who speaks a language. Otherwise, you might think that, oh, there's no research being done when it's actually already being done. And I also want to point out a few key things that you might come up or to consider in the localization research. From official languages to the name formats and length to the internet speed and personas. So I will pick 4 things to explain today. So the official language, it's pretty obvious. In Netherlands, it's Dutch. In Germany, it's German. But then if today you're designing for users of a country where English is one of the official language, you must pay attention to the spelling. Is it a US spelling or the UK spelling? And if it's a country that uses Chinese, is like Malaysia or maybe like Vietnam, is it a simplified Chinese or is it traditional Chinese? There's actually a difference. And you want to be aware of these languages nuances when you do localization. The second thing is the holiday sales. So if you work in e-commerce, then this is definitely something you want to be aware of. For example, the Singles' Day in China, the November 11. Did you know that in 2017, the Singles' Day set a world record for the most payment transactions, naming 1.5 billion transactions just on this one day. So if you're selling stuff and since Chinese users are part of your demographic, definitely consider it. And other important, well, not important, but like kind of well-known holidays, sales periods are Black Friday, Boxing Day, Great Singapore Sale, which is in the summer, and everybody just go crazy buying stuff because there's nothing else to do in Singapore. And Valentine's Day, which is really cool. So on March 14, like Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam of Asian ethnicity all celebrating. And you'll see how the website all turned into white, with white elements, with white product, everything just turning to white. So there's something very cool. And the next thing is about internet speed. So internet speed can actually influence how the users use your product. For example, in Philippines, where the internet speed is not very high, and you cannot expect everybody to have iPhone 10 and using the latest browsers. When I designed for users in Singapore, they were using really small phones that are not even touchscreen. They were using WAP phones, they were using the really small dumb phones, and with really low internet speed. So that's why a lot of companies such as Facebook and Uber are now designing something called like Facebook Lite or Uber Lite to target, to serve the users of countries where internet speed might be really low on average. Like you could compare the internet speed of South Korea with almost 30 megabytes per second to Venezuela, where the difference is really, really high. So definitely do some research about the internet speed because you definitely want to think about like the compression, like the image loading, whatever that might affect the user experience considering the internet speed. And the last thing I want to talk about is the device and smartphone stats. So I use this tool called StatCounter, and if you go to gs.statcounter.com, you can actually look at the screen resolution by different markets and by different countries. So this is something that I really like to use, and this is the difference between Argentina and Australia. So you can see, you can actually, if you want to design for users of Singapore, you just click on Singapore and it will give you a breakdown of the screen resolutions, the percentage, and it's actually very up-to-date stats. So I highly recommend this. Lastly, I want to talk about world domination. If you want to design product that's serving users all over the world, there are some ways you can actually achieve that. And when I work with clients from around the world and those who succeed in designing for users of different cultures and those that don't, I notice there is a difference. The first difference is the team diversity. Why should we have a team of diverse people? According to this agency that's based in London, who designed for clients around Europe, And they mentioned that having a mixed background actually allow ideas to bounce back differently. And you end up making interesting connections, and you have really different perspective. And that really helps when you're designing for users around the world and of different cultures. So having a diverse team is definitely an asset if you want to design for users of different cultures and on the other side of the world. The second thing is that when you design for users of different cultures, you can do travel and you can do ethnographic research to truly understand your users. And did you know that despite all the things I said before about culture research, living like a local, in my opinion, is the best way to experience and be immersed in the local culture. I was only able to understand so much about the Singaporean culture after living there for 2 years. And of course, you don't have to move there for 2 years in order to localize for Singapore. Even just a short trip of 1 week or 2 when you get out of the tourist mode is enough for you to maybe find time to talk to the local, join some local meetups, get to understand like what do the local people care about, what are some of the topics, what are some of the burning questions, and how do they actually behave differently when in a usability test, for example. And actually, I want to know who traveled to come to the conference here. Okay, actually quite a lot of people, 20, 30%. Travel is actually my biggest passion. It's not design. And I really like to travel because it opens up your perspective and it's just so interesting. And did you know that travel has its RI? According to Mondo, people who travel have a more positive view on the people of countries visited. They have a more positive views on other cultures in general. And most importantly, they have a more positive views on differences and diversity. So travel is one of the best things you can do when you want to design for users around the world. And I talk about all the things that you could do or you should do, and I want to give one tip about one thing that you shouldn't do, or you probably don't want to do. That is Google Translate. Or machine translation, any of a kind, for that matter. You know? Or what can happen? Yeah, let's just use Google Translate. It's fast and it's free. What can go wrong, right? And this is actually a real example of a design that I saw on Twitter. And with best intentions, this company, when they were going to China for a business meeting, they translated their business cards. However, as somebody who speaks Chinese, I can actually notice a few mistakes, and I wish that they had consulted somebody who speaks the language before they print it out and give it to their Chinese partners. So what's wrong about the translations? First thing is that the name, Vish, is translated to Ko. So he might be being called Mr. Ko, when he has no idea who is Mr. Ko because of this mistranslation. Secondly, the phone numbers. So I know in Holland we have this space between every 2 letters, every 2 digits, and then we have this +310. But in a Chinese person's eyes, it doesn't make much sense. Firstly, because the M, it stands for mobile. But if you need to translate a whole business card into Chinese in the first place, how would a Chinese person understand M is for mobile? And the Dutch phone number format actually doesn't make much sense to somebody who is not Dutch because to us, it just looks like a random string of numbers, and it's super hard to read. So what could have been better in this case to just use international phone number format, like plus, blah, blah, and then all of the numbers like together, or at least in some more readable way of separating the digits. So don't put a space in every 2 letters. That's one of my pet peeves. And lastly, probably it's really hard to see, but best from Amsterdam is translated into better be from Amsterdam. Dank u wel.
Thank you so much. I saw Twitter exploding when you said something about the Chinese preferring to browse instead of search. Are there more examples that you say that we just take for granted because we would probably use search in such a case?
Yeah. More examples?
Yeah, would you have more of those examples?
In the services I design, I think it is also true. So I work with the e-commerce clients very recently, and then in e-commerce side you have the search bar, and then you have like the mega menu where you can select the categories. And from our Google Analytics, people were going to the mega menu more than using search. And one of the reasons, this is maybe a little bit unrelated, is that when they use search, since this is a localized site, they have this concern where they cannot find what they want if they search in Japanese, because it might not always translate correctly, and there might be like 3 to 5 ways that one term can be translated into Japanese or Chinese. So therefore, if search might not be always the best way. So that's from one of my recent projects, aside from these portal search engines.
And you also talked about this hamburger versus the discovery, and I find it hard to find out what's happening in another cultures. Do you have any sources or people that can that are writing about this?
I don't think. Yeah, there are a few people that's writing about it, but there's like not one person who's always writing about it. So sometimes I go to like Medium, but most of the time if I'm designing for a new country, like for example UAE, Saudi Arabia, I just try to like search a bit, like what are the most common sites and apps used in those countries. And if I have any friends who's from that country, I just say, hey, like where do you usually go for news? Where do you go to shop? Where do you go for ordering a taxi? Then that's how I start my competitor research. It's by talking to locals and also doing a bit of internet research to find out like what those sites actually are.
Yeah. What was very triggering about your talks that you started with actually the difference between Germany and the Netherlands, not like not especially China or the Netherlands or. So if you optimize for this, where do you put the line and how? Because I can imagine maybe people from Amsterdam are already different than Limburg.
Yeah, where to put the line? That's a really interesting question. At the end of the day, like localization, it's a really, really big project and it does cost a lot. I think it would just be knowing what are the must and what are the nice to have. It's all about prioritization. For example, I didn't show it in this talk, but Japanese users, for example, they really like looking at rankings. They really like bestsellers. They want the bestseller in every single category. They want to know what other people are buying. They want to know what other people like. But then how many of those sales bestseller modules are you putting there? And if their culture is really different, it kind of feels like it's really a lot to do the localization. So it's about prioritization and like linking it to a business KPI, linking it to a business goal. What is the thing that we can do that can generate good ROI? Therefore, it makes sense to do the localization.
Yeah, there was one question from the audience from Dragan Elias. He said, how useful is the design or engineering investment for localized changes in business value while breaking into a market compared to other maybe business priorities you have? And he said, is it better to do this all up front or during your maturation of the market when you have your products already a little bit longer on the market?
I think for a lot of companies, including like Travelbird and probably like companies like Booking.com, it's a good idea to first have a bit of maturity in one market, and therefore you know that the product is viable, and then you already kind of have a grasp of who your users are and what they want, and then you think about localization when you want to expand your market. But in the very beginning, to think about we want to target 20 countries or 30 countries, that's a little bit ambitious, and then you will have in the beginning, like you don't have so much resources. So what's the business value is that when you want to expand to a new market and where you see there's a new market with really huge opportunities, like maybe Germany, UK, China, where it's a bit more users, then it kind of makes sense. But of course, you have to do some business research about the market size and things like that. Yeah. And just to answer, like, what is the business value for why we do localization? There are some clients who have come to me just for localization services because they already tried to launch in Germany, but it doesn't work. The same design, the same content doesn't work, so they have to localize. And if they want to break into the market, yeah, they have to adapt to the local culture differences. I also had one client that's in Vietnam. And she told me how in her past project, they didn't do any localization. And she was very surprised how the difference in conversion rates were. So that's one of the experiences from one of my past clients.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you work in the travel industry, and you think that's the best place to be to experiment with these kind of things?
I think so. I'm very, very blessed, and like travel is an industry where people automatically thinking about international users, because why would you just sell travel services to just one country? It's kind of natural, such as like Booking.com, expand to multiple countries. So, yeah.
At the same time, you had in recent years, I think, the globalization of design, that everything started working and maybe looking the same. Do you think this is going to change in the upcoming years, that there will be much more custom experiences?
I think so, definitely. Then, like the topic of like AI personalization is very big, because at the end we all want to feel special. Users want to feel special. We want something that's like tailored to our needs, because my needs is not different from your needs or somebody else's needs. We all want something that's like we like and what we want. So I think in the future, or maybe even right now, that users are going to expect even features that kind of work with these personalization and like personalized for my culture. And maybe in the near future, I think it's very interesting. For example, here we have a diverse crowd. In Amsterdam, there's 183 nationalities. Maybe we later will even see how the machine will start to pick up different nuances, even for people of one country, because we have different backgrounds. So that's something I think interesting for the future.
When I introduced you, you got an applause for the ladies that UX. Well, what's your motivate? What would you like to see to improve in the upcoming years when it's about well, maybe women in tech? Is that something you would like to promote more?
Sure. So the mission of Ladies at UX is we want to promote female talent, and we want to promote diversity and also the equal gender ratio in the tech industry. And my mission when I started Ladies at UX Amsterdam, and now as a regional director of EMEA, is that we want to grow a lot more female leaders. We want to see more women on stage. We want to see more women CEOs. We want to see more just leaders. Leaders, because leaders grow other leaders. And it's very important to have a role model that young girls can look up to and get into STEM and get into tech. So that's one of my missions, and that's some of the things that Ladies at UX and also other like Girls in Tech and other communities that we want to do.
Fantastic work. Thank you very much for your talk and having the questions.
Thank you.